Hello friends and welcome back. My name is Kat and I'm a filmmaker and journalist. Recently something was brought to my attention and it's a topic that I realised is actually quite interesting to discuss and could be quite beneficial for people who are thinking about moving to Hong Kong. Something that we did as kids, kind of naturally. Well, to most it came naturally, to some maybe not so much. But it kind of gets harder as you become an adult, and it's making friends. It sounds kind of strange, doesn't it? As adults, making friends is a bit tougher than when you're a kid on a playground, because you're all kind of stuffed on this playground and you mix and mingle. In adults, you don't really have that sort of situation. I guess you could say a bar is a place that happens, but people, generally speaking, still would keep to themselves or keep to the circles of people that they know. So if you're relying on accidental meetings, yeah, it doesn't quite work that way. It's not like you can just shimmy up to someone who's in the supermarket and say, "Hey, I love those oranges. Wanna come play at my house? Friends?" Oftentimes, when you move to a separate place where you don't really know anybody, you have to go through this whole new process of making friends. If you stay within the same country, you still have roots and connections that you can reach out to a relative of your friend back in the city that you grew up in, or someone that went to the same school as you who moved to the same city. You know, you have these groups, but what if you move to a place that is completely different? And that is the case with a lot of people who move to Hong Kong. Many move here either for a job or for their partner's job. Either way, the person will often not have any friends that they grew up with. I'd say it's similar as with most places. When you want to make friends as an adult, it's kind of a conscious decision. Back when I was in the US, if you're in any of the major cities like New York and San Francisco, everyone's a mixture of something, or most people are. So the people are really used to everyone looking a bit different, whether it's height, race, mixed race, and so on. The differentiating factor there is more, I think, language ability, because if everyone is used to everyone looking different, you don't know who grew up in this country. Now, when I was doing my master's degree in Hong Kong, I very quickly realized that people bunched together with people who came from the same countries. And this did mean racial separation, but also it was a little bit deeper than that, because people from mainland China would stick to a group, and then people locally from Hong Kong stuck to a group, and then the foreigners who didn't have many other students coming from their countries ended up in a group. So yeah, some racial separation there. And this does happen in other cities too. Here it felt like it was almost the fear of approaching a foreigner, as though there was something uncomfortable about it. It's just easier to stay in a safe zone. If you see someone in the class who came from the same city as you, then you kind of want to just stick together. It's a bit like a high school dining hall, where you have those cliques, like in Mean Girls, except not that mean, because we're all adults here, ish. For Hong Kong in general, if you look at the bigger friendship groups, I've noticed that they often stay within certain lanes, and I found them to be split something like this. First you have locals, and locals are split into international school people, and then you have the local school people, and by that I mean people who went through those systems. And then you have the mainland Chinese people, who either came here for university or came here for a job. And then in the fourth lane you have foreigners, and that's usually people who moved here for a job as adults. I found a very similar split when I was studying in mainland China as well. Now, I'm not saying that friendship between these lanes is not possible, it completely, totally is, and I've had some wonderful friends from different cultures. But if you've grown up with people who have similar views to you, the same cultural heritage, and you look racially similar, it can take some adjusting. Making friends that are in those different groups might just be a bit harder, because you might have different interests, different habits, different cultural understandings and etiquette. But from my observation, on the surface level, there is some sort of racial separation, but I do think that it boils down to language, because it's such a small place, and it doesn't have a single prominent language, it has 3, or maybe 2 plus 1. It's Cantonese, English, and Mandarin. People who went to international school will probably find it much easier to mix with the foreigners who come here, because English is their first language, or it's an environment that they're used to. Alternatively, locals who have studied abroad and then come back, they might find it easier to mix with foreigners too. It's just easier to converse with someone and understand each other when you speak the same native language. This doesn't mean that you can't befriend someone who doesn't, but it does take an extra step. What may come across as alienation may just be a lack of confidence in speaking the language. There are also some political and economic issues here. Locals have to go through very rigorous studying and academia, and then they see a lot of the jobs that they want to get after graduation being taken by foreigners or people from mainland China. That definitely adds fuel to the fire and adds an extra separation between these groups. And then with the protests that were happening a couple years back, if you've been reading any news related to Hong Kong, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. It's difficult to set aside these political views when you're trying to make friends. Sometimes the easiest option is just to avoid certain groups altogether. Because what if you don't agree with what someone's saying? And it doesn't help that a lot of Westerners get better pay. In fact, when they're hired from abroad, as I mentioned in one of my previous videos, they may get a better salary package, which is a bit of a punch in the face if you went through such rigorous training here. So there is definitely a class separation which is quite clear here, but the reason why it's kind of like a thorn in your side is because of how it affects the people of the city politically and economically. There's also this whole thing where most foreigners who come here don't actually speak Cantonese. And by that I mean probably mostly Westerners, because for a lot of mainland Chinese people to pick up Cantonese is not too difficult, but if you're a Westerner, then it does take effort. Whereas on the flip side, the locals are expected to know how to speak English. There's a bit of a double standard there. Can you imagine the reverse? Say in the US, people growing up there would not be expected to know a foreigner's language. It would be a bonus if they knew it, but it's not expected at all. As you can see, it's definitely possible that there's some tension building up around, you know? And that just creates extra barriers towards making friends. I'd say if you want to mix in with different cultures, then take an interest in the culture, take some classes, and also go to some hobbyist groups. If you meet someone who has a similar interest to you, regardless of what culture they're from, that is automatically something that brings you together. Crossing over to a different cultural group to make friends, it can feel uncomfortable, especially in the beginning, but if you do it in a very sort of non-pushy, kind and positive way, it is definitely possible. And it is fascinating the amount of things that you can learn from another culture, because if you're looking at a culture from an outsider's perspective, there's only so much that you can know, but when you're friends with someone who knows the culture inside out and grew up with it, you learn so much. It's definitely worth it. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope this provides a little bit of insight on the whole thing about making friends and how that is a bit different in Hong Kong. Of course, this is all from my experiences. If you had different experiences, share it in the comments below. I'm always open to reading what yours have been like, and maybe someone else will find it helpful. See you next time. Bye!